Welcome back to the TechFlow Futures Theatre here at BVE 2019. If you were here for our previous session, our Technology Leaders panel, you would have heard a lot of discussion about the importance of sport, particularly when it comes to delivering live content experiences to consumers. And we stay with the sports theme now for our next session, and specifically learning how the sports industry is starting to use artificial intelligence and smart content cataloging to revolutionize the way football, or soccer if you're Luke, is delivered to audiences, and how brands are operating and delivering content to fans. So, to introduce the speakers who are going to take you through this technology and how it can be used, we have Luke Comeau in the middle, who is from Delette Digital Media Systems, and he is joined by two colleagues from Athena's Owl, who are the brains behind the AI technology. We have Ritesh Patel, and starting us off is Vivek Kamani. Just before Vivek starts, I will remind you that you can share what you're hearing and learning on social media, so follow the event at BV Expo, and do tweet your pictures and thoughts and comments and ideas with the hashtag BVE19. And if you've got questions for these guys, we'll have a roving mic going around in the latter part of the session, and feel free to ask them really hard questions. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to these guys.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to BVE 2019, and thanks for joining our session. Let me start with saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, all of us have heard that 1,000 times over, but for an AI engineer, it would translate into a video is worth 1 million metadata points. All right, so this session is about demystifying what I just said, right? I have found in the past that the audience cannot bear me for more than 15 minutes. So we have split this into two parts, and we have our friend Luke from Delette System to share his experiences and his thoughts about the topic. And I have with me Ritesh, my co-founder, to talk with Luke about his thoughts. Let me start here with a sample video that we can use for this conversation.
Spent all right, keeping goal again for Bayern today. It's Robert Lewandowski. Oh, it's 2-0. Beautifully played. Now feeding it away to Arjen Robben. Alarm bells will be ringing for Dortmund here. Robben looks for an opening, and he's found it. 4 minutes into the second half, he's been looking.
Okay, that's a great play by Arjen Robben, and a typical stats keeper would record stuff like ball possession time, number of successful passes made, number of goals attempted, or obviously the number of goals scored. Editorial value resides in many more things outside of these stats. Think of it as a piece of video that can unpack into its elements, such as images that contain players, or it contains specific objects that are only special to football, for example, a red card or a shield of the tournament. Think of it as emotions that are expressed and are visible on screen. A video would also contain sound, which would be, let's say, pitch of the noise of the crowd or the whistle of the referee. A video would also contain text, such as scores that are available on screen, or some special comments that are available on screen, and so on and so forth. Now let's look at the same piece of video through the eyes of Athena's Owl.
Spent all right, keeping goal again for Bayern today. It's Robert Lewandowski. Oh, it's 2-0. Beautifully placed. Alarm bells will be ringing for Dortmund here. Robin looks for an opening, and he's found it. 4 minutes into the second half, he's been looking and looking and looking throughout the match, Arjen Robben. He's gone close.
There you go. The same video does not talk about ball possession time, but talks about the amount of time that the player was visible on screen. Does not talk about number of goals scored, but identifies and annotates a video for the expression that was visible on screen on the face of the player. Does not talk about the number of goals scored, but it talks about the camera angle that was used to take the shot. These are all elements that are used while creating a highlight. Let's take another example.
No major problem for Manuel Neuer, just a minor foot operation after an injury picked up in training a couple of weeks ago.
Logos of brands spending billions of dollars on sports across the globe to make themselves visible while the game is going on, right? How do you really measure the effectiveness of this spend? How do you know whether the money that I spent was visible at the time that I wanted it to be visible? These are special features that are made available by AI for producers and distributors of sports content. What does this mean in terms of implementation? Here's an example of one of our implementations for a large football archive. Owns over 100,000 hours of football content spanning across 40, 50 years of football history, and looking to leverage such features such that they can actually search their archive better, and basis that capability have greater ability to monetize that content in ways that can engage their fans better. What we delivered in this situation was context-trained AI, specifically trained on over 500 players spanning this history in their archive, looking for special logos which are specific to their clubs and teams, looking for the shield of the league, looking for moments such as, can I find this player expressing happiness at a given moment? Find me all those things. So what does this mean for a content archive, right? People who actually manage and store content for current and future use. A content archive value chain would span from the time that it starts ingesting the content which has been created. The first step to do is to categorize that content in ways that can then be useful for future purposes, and create a media library which can then be searched. Now think about places or spots in this value chain where AI can make an impact. Categorization, being able to generate custom metadata which is specific to those players and leagues, and make that metadata available in a time-coded fashion so that it is then available for future use. At the time of searching and browsing or exporting specific clips, making these metadata points come alive so that you can conduct what we call as deep search. So how does AI really help in this whole meta tagging process? If you compare metadata using AI versus using manual systems, automation is obviously the first benefit that it delivers. Accuracy in tagging, removing manual bias in the time of tagging. Meets customer needs in a customized way. Several AI systems which have been trained for generic use will not do the tagging for football at the level of accuracy that only football can, that is required by football, unless you have an AI that has been trained specifically on football content, right? Improve team efficiency minus the extra cost, and instantaneously help you create content from the archived content. These we have seen have led to greater opportunities in unlocking, monetizing opportunities in ways that you have wanted to do before but haven't been able to do. Right. In terms of how the AI works, it's pretty simple. It is delivered on the cloud in a completely scalable architecture. Provide your content on the cloud, and what you get in return is a few APIs that would run on your content and deliver the meta tags that you're looking for. Available for you to browse through a smart UI, and then download those results either into a database or ingest them into your MAM system. Here's a quick view of how it can help you in making some of your workflows smarter. So if you look at how highlights are created, a producer, an editor, or technical reviewers, a team of 2 or 3 people looking at a match while it's going on to then identify highlight-worthy clips. Large part of this process can be automated using AI, which is in the workflow on the lower part of the slide. So we described most of the use in the archive system. However, if you look at the overall value chain of football production, there is production and broadcast that happens on linear as well as OTT, archiving, analysis of your content as to what kind of content is getting more fan engagement in different types of target markets, and then post-production in terms of creating automated highlights or social media posts and so on and so forth. In each of these steps in the value chain of the production and distribution of football, you would find various ways in which you can leverage AI. So we have found that different participants, not just the content owners, but also the broadcasters, technology companies that are providing technology for sports production, as well as clubs that have teams that play the game, they all can benefit from this kind of metadata creation process and smart workflows that help them in their day-to-day lives of football production and distribution. All right, so what I would like to do is switch over to the panel for their discussion and then come back for Q&A and closure. Okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Vivek, for the deep dive into how AI is revolutionizing the football industry and the very basis on which Athena's Owl was built, right? Speaking to our customers, we know that Athena's Owl is just beginning to unlock the value in the media content. Every time we speak to a customer and a partner, we find new ways that Athena's Owl can impact their business, right? So several use cases that we see as we speak to them. This gives us great motivation in building a product that is leading the industry in media content. So I want to first give a big thank you to our customers and partners for providing us the feedback and being part of our journey. For our next segment, I'll obviously have Luke. Luke leads strategic initiatives at Dalit Digital Media System. He's an industry leader and has been doing this for over 20 years, building media platforms, has worked at several large media and entertainment companies around the world by applying his expertise and leading innovative teams to building and powering media content, right? So thanks, Luke, for doing this with us. So to get us started, what I want to ask Luke is, you speak to so many customers, right, day in and day out. How do you think that the customer needs are evolving today with all the evolution of AI?
Well, I think it's fourfold. I think speed is of essence, especially in live entertainment, and very relevant in the topic that Vivek addressed. I think I call them the four staples of what we're getting from our customer base in terms of new requirement. I call those like automate the logical, augment the editorial, optimize the material or resources, and accelerate the engagement. I think those are the, from management to operational to engineering, those very connect with the needs of the audience to consume more, have more relevancy with their content, and we're seeing more and more diversification into audience affinities and developing new avenues to reach your audience or that affinity to the audience. So I think we're seeing a lot of industry-generated requirements that completely correlate into, what we're embarking on.
Yeah. So I mean, Dale works on almost all verticals, right? TV, news, sports. If I may ask, right, specifically in sports, right, is there like one common need that you see across all the segments, or everybody's kind of evolving on their own in terms of how they want to leverage AI?
Well, I think the end game is to keep eyeballs and get more eyeballs. So I think that's universal across any kind of content owner or creator. I think in live sports, what we're really spending a lot of time is, with the help of AI technologies, is to empower those different services within the organization, but more importantly, on the creative and editorial side, getting actionable insights. Not necessarily replace the functions, but augment those functions with more relevant content. Simple examples of that are more in align with, it's very easy to research and find factual information, and then start creating that content in a traditional production environment. What Vivek was highlighting with the advent of identifying subjective things, or identifying, like, for example, logos or things like that, the ability to say, I want you to automatically present me a sequence of this key player across my entire archive, including the live event that's going on. I want to see him score a goal in front of a Pepsi logo, in front of the goal, across the last 5 games. Now, because I want to play that on air now, or I want to engage socially with a quick short clip. The speed in which we can tap into those resources to present the editors, the producers, readily accessible, relevant content, or to build new affinities into your audience and say, I'm going to immediately build a channel for these particular players and keep on feeding them a lot of content without increasing the demand on infrastructure and manpower.
Got it. So keeping that customer need in mind, and where AI is in terms of its own evolution, right? Because we are just beginning to see the impact of that. How do you think that AI can respond to those needs?
Yep. So Dalet has been presenting and implementing some very interesting things around, again, like I said, the 4 staples which 3 of them are very mechanical, optimize and scale up and provision your resources, orchestrate more efficiently by predicting what's coming down the line and optimizing those resources. But back to the storytelling and augmenting that storytelling with AI, we've worked a lot and have within our product the ability to help the storyteller as they're creating it by presenting them relevant content as they're actually creating, writing or editing. So as I'm typing information about a particular topic, it is both presenting me inwardly across my archive, hey, you're talking about this, so maybe you should be using this. And we already know from the return on the previous airs or the previous distribution that these spots, everybody tuned out, so you shouldn't use that content. And as well outwardly to know what's trending right now, and here I've presented you some relevant content in your inventory that you might want to use. So everything around the storytelling, and then bringing that closer to the now time when we're talking about live sports, so that you can have better relevancy and context in your engagement.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting perspective of AI in kind of live environment, and kind of providing a return path with those live feeds,
Right.
which opens a lot of possibilities, right? So one thing that comes to my mind is, highlights, right? I mean, typically highlights are still done very editorially in terms of what audience would want to see, right? How do you think with this new transformation, auto highlights based on user preferences, is this something that you hear, or are you seeing adoption of that?
Yeah. I mean, similarly to assisting the creative or editorial team in-house, using AI married to the content inventory on the presentation layer, on your OTT apps, et cetera, integrating that so that you know your audience, you know that user itself, you know its usage, and bringing relevancy within the content itself so that you're discovering new content. Not just we know that keyword X was used to find certain titles, but what you're actually doing while you're consuming that content and what's inside it that made you stay or leave, using AI to then present new candidates for consumption or engagement based on that, not just based on I search for goals, but actually what the user itself is consuming.
Got it. Now let me ask you specifically in your world of, in your role in Dale, how is Dale thinking of leveraging AI to stay relevant in terms of their own products? Any specific insights that you can share?
Yeah, I think really the value that we're bringing is, again, bringing those insights into the content production, editorial, and presentation side. So not just go to the library and search for something and then decide what to do, but inject this across all steps and all phases of the production. So really it's about marrying that live dynamic data that will constantly evolve as well. So it's not like using say QC and say analyze me this file to tell me if it's within my standards, and once I've ran that through, the data remains the same for life. With AI, we're seeing a lot of knowledge graph being updated as you train it further. So in the context of a content inventory, content production environment, that rich game that I've acquired, I want to benefit from the further training that the AI service are learning as they go and re-inject that into my content for more relevancy. Maybe it didn't know about logo 2 years ago, but now it knows about logos. How do you ensure that that information re-injects into your content and becomes even more rich and discoverable.
So like AI has become a buzzword, like everyone knows that. So let's talk about some challenges, right? So what challenges will AI embedded solutions face as it becomes mainstream, right? So if you can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think Dalet addresses both broadcasters, studio production, news and environment. I think the first area that you're gonna get into is who's got my content and who's got my data. So security around content rights as you're submitting this to the AI community to process, who benefits from that learning of your rich content, who keeps that data. Those are two issues that aren't resolved that a lot of our media and entertainment customers are of course, there are standards that are trying to define this kind of protection over your content rights, but we're getting into are you helping Microsoft learn about certain things on your content that they wouldn't have learned before? I'm not saying it's bad or not. The question is, who's benefiting from this data, and how do you ensure that if my particular agreement is it's my data, how do I ensure that I maintain competitive edge with my rich content? So it's a complex issue that is nowhere near resolved, but we're being faced with a lot of our customers on, wait, you're shipping that where? What's happening to it, and what's happening to the data?
Yeah, clearly data and security is kind of the top priority for the customers. One of the things that we hear often, and I want to ask you as well, is as AI is starting to emulate human beings, right, in decision making, right? There is some nervousness from the customers that how good it's going to be as compared to human beings, and letting that control go, right, to the machines, right? Do you think that concern is going away, and industry is starting to adopt AI in ways that it can impact without feeling that loss of control?
I think I would correlate that to if I'm sure many of you understand what QC is, and automated QC and the early days of that, and where we are at today, where you can most likely entrust a lot of medial task of analysis to a QC, automated file-based QC tool that's going to tell me, this is in my standard, I have these drop frames, it's within this threshold, therefore it's good to go or not good to go. And today in most supply chain environments or production environments, and Dalet brokers and choreographs all of this, it's typically spot check at the end just to make sure nothing slipped through the cracks, but it's fairly well adopted. But that kind of, I wouldn't call it AI, but it's basically producing data out of a request, is most likely is predominantly factual. There are 32 drop frames in this, or I have black across this content. They're factual reporting. When we start to deal with live content or any content on the editorial side, then that's where we see the value in augmenting that decision making, that creative decision making, as opposed to completely replacing that. I don't see that's coming anytime soon.
Got it. My final question for you, Luke. Can you give us some real examples of how that can show the power of AI, right? Something that has been used today.
Yep. So I think two examples that I think I mentioned previously. One is auto highlight creation. So determining the challenge in determining while the game is going on, I want to see whenever a goal is scored, I want to have an ad insertion that I've already sold to Pepsi in advance spots, because I guarantee you'll get a 20-second replay with that player in front of this, along with archival material that is only going to have him in front of a Pepsi logo, for example. That's the first kind of example that you could have very fast typing librarians and all of that. The time it takes to produce that storyboard for then a craft person to finish the content and go to air, that's one particular aspect that we see and that we're spending a lot of investment on. The other one is around, as you're creating, keep giving me relevant information outwardly and inwardly from within the creative tools.
Yeah, clearly, I think a lot of things that already been adopted and a lot more to do as we move forward. But at this time, I want to open it up for any questions that we might have for our panel and Vivek.
Hey, we've got Greg Schiff from, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, hey. Greg Schiff from Dell EMC. One of the things you mentioned I thought was interesting was this idea of injecting metadata into archival content so that, as your AI improves, you're able to take advantage of that in your legacy material. But how does that impact cold archives, right? If I have data that's locked on LTO or up in the cloud, say in Glacier, where there's a long time to be able to get at that data, what is your thinking in terms of that?
Well, I think you said two things there. But to me, cold is dead cold, i.e. physical somewhere where we need to migrate it to a digital landscape to actually do something. So if we're talking something in a vault or something in a robot, we need to move that to the cloud in order to capitalize on the cloud resources and cloud AI resources to actually do that function. What we're doing for a lot of our customers, since we are the system of record, the gatekeeper of their rich content, irregardless of their state, online, nearline, archive, cold, dead cold, is the ability to then put logical process and choreography onto what's really important to then broker with AI resources. So not just like do 2018 and you've got B-rolls galore that are useless that you don't want to do, but use the metadata rich already content that's in the library to start doing logical brokering of those services. The summit right now in Vietnam is trending. Find me all the content in your library that has that. Only bring that and further curate. Maybe we'll find something out of that that could be relevant. So putting kind of logic and orchestration in the MAM to logically broker the AI. I don't know if that answers.
I think so. I mean, if I'm understanding what you're saying is leverage your existing AI tagging on that warm content, let's say, to decide what stuff you're going to then analyze again and continue to add richness to.
Right. Exactly. And again, we believe that the richness of the data that the AI provides is intrinsically inherited in your content inventory, which you can then tap into as additional data points to orchestrate, make decisions, and things like that. Yeah.
And also in terms of, at the head of the decision of whether to put content in cold storage, right?
Yeah.
As you sort of go down the path of having more smart data available about your catalog in relation to the how is it engaging to the customer, you could then also have a logical decisioning framework as to what content should really go into the cold storage in the first place. Right? So that's the other advantage of looking at content from a completely different dimension. Great. Okay. All right. So let me close this session. Oh, we have a question. Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is basically, what is the risk of, because whenever we talk about artificial intelligence, it's more about the risk of false positive and false negative. And so what's the risk of false positive and negative in case when we are talking about live games and when AI is trying to predict something or trying to guess something out of it? And how far we can take that risk in such scenarios?
I think the answer to that lies in a few things. One is how relevant is the AI that you are really using in context of the content, right? So there are general purpose AI that is now available off the cloud from large providers, which can be used on any content, but that is meant for general purpose, right? So it will have a certain degree of accuracy in terms of face detection, and it probably will have a lower degree of accuracy in terms of football face detection. And the difference between the two is when you are trying to do face detection of, let's say, a speaker in a newsroom versus a player who's running on a field, there is aspects of temporal data across time, and then there is aspects of, let's say, image blur due to motion. Right? So if you want to increase the accuracy of AI performance, what you have to do is you have to context train your AI. Right? The moment you sort of start doing that, you're kind of training AI which is specific to the context. In this case, we are talking about football, and then you will start seeing accuracies improve. The second aspect in that is just the technology itself, right? So you would find that face detection technology has evolved a lot more than, let's say, emotion detection technology.